morning, listeners. This morning I'd like to interview Tim Wise, a friend. We've been collaborating and sharing the life that we live jointly here in Western Australia over the last, I think, 25, 30 years. So Tim and I have known each other a long while. We've followed a similar path in many ways. We've both been involved in the corporate world, but at the same time, we've both been interested in and pursuing our own sort of spiritual growth and our own journey in becoming more aware of that aspect of our lives and how we live that in connection with our relationships, the environment, the community. And now we're at that stage of our life, this enjoyable stage of our life where we're starting to share that more and more with friends, colleagues, people we know. And you've gone the one step further and actually published a book. So I'm super impressed with, because we all know a lot of people who've talked about publishing a book, but you've gone to the effort of doing that. So congratulations, well done, Tim. It's, I've got some questions for you out of that, and it's very interesting. I think it's really captured the essence of a lot of the things that we go through in life, particularly the journey that you and I have sort of been on the last 20 or 30 years with family, corporate life, and a spiritual life. So it's very unique I think in the way that you've approached it. Very practical, very readable. But before we get into that, I'd like to start with a question that if I was to meet you for the first time, I was sitting at a dinner table or a function or an aeroplane, and we start chatting, and I say, so what do you do? What would be your answer? How would you respond to me if we hadn't met before and we're sitting next to each other on a plane? What would be the response?
It's probably the hardest question. I sometimes used to look back at that. I watched myself answer that question at various points in my life, and I found that there was I felt like I was on repeat. And then the story would change, and then it would be something else, because I've done a lot of different things throughout my career and life. Today, I would say I am involved in our family business, Wise Winery, and I help run that. Well, I oversee that as an owner, and we've got a fantastic team that run it day to day. I sit on several boards of various companies in the corporate world, and then I also have it's not that any of these things are separate, but I also have a spiritual life, and one of the ways that I express myself is through the Native American Sweat Lodge, which I've been doing for 12 years now, and down in this region. So I don't know that there's any way to answer that. I mean, you could go into the deeper questions, which we'll probably get into, but who am I and these types of things. But in terms of the roles that I play, those are the roles. To me, they become less and less important as I go through my life. I become more and more detached from them, but at the same time, that's given me in myself even more permission to have fun in those roles and to actually be better at them, paradoxically.
That's a really good introduction, because you are well known down here in the Yallingup region where the winery is, and you're well known for your sweat lodges, which I think you introduced to the community 10, 15 years ago. I remember participating with you in one of the very early sweat lodges on your property, and they become a feature of the winter program for many people here in the southwest. They've got a lot of benefit out of that, and it's a very traditional approach that you've introduced. I think all the feedback that I've had from people over the years is just how genuine and authentic the experience has been to participate in a sweat lodge with you. So well done, brother. That's been awesome, and there's been a lot of healing go on in those sessions over the years. I know a lot of people have shared their experiences, and that the heat, the sweat, it's usually in winter. It's usually wet, and the elements are all involved. So it's been a real journey for you, and to be able to again start that sweat lodge up again this winter. I guess it's about that time of the year when you're probably thinking about getting it up and running again now that we can light fires.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had 2 this season so far.
Right.
The first one was a private lodge, so sometimes we'll have either like what I call a community lodge, and sometimes we'll have a private lodge. The first one was actually someone who was celebrating their 50th, and she brought together some friends, and that was super powerful. We had fresh rocks that we get from a very sacred site, and yeah, so it was physically hot. It was emotionally very beautiful. There was a lot of good sentiment in that lodge. But what we've really created, and this is on our site where we do the lodges, is it's like I call it a sacred site because we've just built up so much energy there over so many years. And when people come there, it's palpable, like you can feel it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then, my teachers, Shanti Mai in particular, always told me that what we do in our sweat lodges ripples out into the cosmos. Like she always instilled in me that you don't know the extent of what you're doing. You think you just got a few people together and you're doing some prayers and maybe some things. No, it's a ripple effect through the whole cosmos. And I never doubted her in that. In fact, but it wouldn't also have occurred to me without her instruction and her guidance on that. So for her, there's a word in a Native American culture called Pila Maya, and she recently passed away, which was actually earlier this year. So that was a huge thing for me and for those of who are her students or who are her students. And she left us with so much in terms of her example that she set around integrity and doing things in a traditional way, honouring the Indigenous cultures and all those types of things. Because when we're dealing with something like a Native American sweat lodge or an Anipi ceremony, as they call it, we have to tread very carefully because these cultures have had so much taken away from them. So to me, it's super important to not do anything that's out of integrity that way. And that's a dance. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that, Tim. And I recall your trips to the US. You spent a lot of time actually in sweat lodges and working with some amazing people over there that you were able to then bring those teachings and practices back with you and incorporate that into the offerings that you give down here. And it's interesting. We had a visit from a good friend that you know as well a few days ago, Julian Silburn, who introduced me to the didgeridoo 10 or 15 years ago. And
did I introduce you to Joel?
You may have been a part of it. I think you might have been there at the time.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether you know, but he's been working with a group that have been involved in these burying these ceremonial Tibetan vases around the world, healing vases. And it's been going for, I think they've buried nearly 90 of them now. And they start off in Tibet, and there's a whole process that goes on to invoke the prayers and meditations and highest offerings into these bowls. And then they go out around the world and meet with Indigenous people in different parts of the world, have a ceremony. And on the way, there's the whole journey of the vase, which has been documented. There's some good documentaries on it all that include meeting with different groups on the way to add offerings and prayers and meditations. And so Julian stopped here last week, actually, last Tuesday, and with him he had one of the coordinators from the program who's from Japan, who's a Lama and a Qigong master, and a very, very interesting person. It was a blessing to have him here because we were able to participate in a little ceremony with this vase that was very authentic as well. And Julian brings that authenticity with him, and the many, many years he spent with Aboriginal Australians, learning their ceremonies and their practices, their healing techniques, particularly with the didgeridoo and his background there. And then they went on to Albany and met with some elders in Albany, and last week went through the ceremony and buried one of these vases. So a bit like the message that Shanti Mai gave you, there was there's this connection that they're forming around the world of this grid, if you like, of combined, offerings, sharings, heart openings, linking together in ways that we can't understand. We could, it's beyond the mind to sort of comprehend what
100%.
What the impact of this has been. And this particular vase was actually created 7 years ago. So it's been 7 years to the moment felt right, because time's not really relevant in experiences like this. I mean, time's not what we think it is anyway, but it was a 7-year journey that culminated in this ceremony last week. So.
Shanti Mai did a very similar thing with crystals when she was alive.
Okay.
And I think that may still be going on, but she's got crystals planted all over the planet.
Yeah, okay.
With a similar sentiment. So, and she was very well connected even to the Dalai Lama. She knew the Dalai Lama. So
there's a connection here, because this group was connected to the Dalai as well. And he actually was involved in one of the vases in the Northern Territory. So, so when did you meet Shanti Mai, and how did that all come about? I remember when you were going to India, back and forth, and spending some time in workshops and retreats.
Yeah, look, I did a lot of, I sort of did a personal development course back in the day. It was called Future Warrior, run by a guy called Brendan Nichols, who came over from the East Coast up near Byron Bay. And I did a number of these courses. I found them really good. They were basically had, a lot of the processes were based on Indigenous insights and Indigenous initiations and so forth. And in one of the talks that he gave, he mentioned the word satsang. And that word, as soon as I heard it, I'm talking 30 plus years ago, as soon as I heard the word, I thought, I've got to get myself to a satsang. It just felt familiar. There was something about it. And I thought, I just got to get there. And you probably remember back in the day in Perth, there was a magazine called Nova magazine.
Yeah, very well. Yeah, absolutely.
So a couple of weeks later, it might have even been a couple of days later, I was flicking through a Nova magazine, and there was a half-page ad there, and it said, Shanti Mai, coming to Perth, Shenton Park for a satsang at these times, etc. Ring Om.
Right.
OM, right? So I ring this guy called Om. He says, I'll meet you. Let's have a chat. I went and chatted with him. He said, Shanti Mai's coming these times. I said, right. I don't think I had to meet Om. I don't know why. I can't remember why I met Om. Okay. Other than, anyway, I ended up at this satsang, right? And I just, I met Shanti Mai for the first time, and something just connected. I just fell in, I fell in love, like in the sense that there was a deep connection there, a deep knowing that this was my master, and that's what unfolded. And then within a week or so, I'd taken basically an initiation, and and that was it. And there's nothing, and it wasn't like anything. That initiation didn't mean anything other than, you are formalizing, the relationship within yourself. It wasn't like, you had to sign anything or you had to turn up at these times, or there was no expectation. And that was always the thing about Shanti Mai. There was never, it was always on you, like, and what you felt and what you wanted to do. There was never any expectation or insistence on anything. So that was, and then you're with yourself. So when you're with yourself, it's like, that's the true reflection, but she always was that, I guess a guiding light in a way, I really couldn't describe what, I think most people who have masters, they can't really describe what that connection is, other than some people call it love, some people call it truth, some call it faith, some call it, you could call it a myriad of different things. Some call it God. So whatever that is,
or a guide,
or a guide. But whatever that is, it just is. And those who have had that experience know it. Those who haven't had it maybe doubt it or question it, or are skeptical or cynical about it. And that's fine. That's just the way it is. That's another, I think this is the other thing, Dave, you mentioned about us getting, older, and, having more freedom to be us. Well, for me, I feel like I've got more freedom to be myself, and it's just this. It really doesn't matter. What other people, what the life that they're living. For me, it's just like there's so much palette to work with and so much feedback, and at the end of the day, it just comes back to this moment and this truth, and that's a concept until it's not. It's almost, for me, like going on that journey has been a lot of it for a lot of my life. I can say has been a concept, like until you start getting glimpses of and experiences of the truth. And then even then you're conceptual and then experiential, conceptual, experiential, until the experiential starts to carry more weight than the conceptual.
You get that feedback, which gives you that sort of the validity, if you like.
Yeah.
Which is a word I've used a few times. And, a bit like me, you say, okay, it's a concept. I'm okay with that. I can have some faith in that, and I'll keep doing it. Like some of the meditation techniques, some of the pranayama techniques that I was doing for years, and I wasn't sure exactly where this was going to lead, but my teacher said, do this every day. So I was doing it every day. And then there's a point where you shift over from doing it because you have some faith that a lot of people have done this for thousands of years, probably millions of people. It's obviously helped a lot of people. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but my own experience is going to be my truth. And after a while, that experience does become your truth, and then you embody it, right? And so that's when we shift into another phase of our own awareness, I guess. And then that sort of sets a template you're very open. You've always been very open, and it's been so cool to see that you're open to different modalities, different therapies, from, tapping to various modalities that we've all looked into over the years. And for some people, they've been very important stages in their life, different modalities, different therapies. But then there's other folk who'll find one therapy and that's it, and they'll stick to that, and they'll close themselves off to other alternatives. And whereas I go through life looking more at what is the stream, what is the river and that's sort of underlying these other tributaries and rivulets that might be flowing from it. And there's just something common that I can experience beyond just the understanding and the conceptualizing of it.
Yeah.
But to experience it, I've got to be open to it, and I've got to be prepared to probably go into the unknown sometimes, and even surrender, some of the terms that you've used in your book. So, I love the way that you've been able to integrate this into your life, and it's almost there's the yoga, the householder, which we talk about, which is regarded in some ways as one of the highest forms of yoga, because in some cases it's easier to be a yogi living in a monastery or living in a cave or living on a mountain somewhere in isolation, the renunciate, if you like. But we're not. That's not the stage of life that we're in, and we have families and children and partners and wives, and now we've got grandchildren and careers and jobs, and there are certain stages in our life where the imperative or the urge to tick the boxes is very, very strong. Whether that's, and as you outline in your book, you call that sort of the above the line activity, which I love the way you describe that, and I like the way you create a pyramid type shape with a line through the triangle, which is actually a symbol for Earth, I think, that symbol with the triangle with the line through it. But the above the line activities sort of peak at the tip of the pyramid. But as we go below the line, it's open to infinity. Yeah. And it's in that below the line concept, which I haven't come across before. So, it was good. It's a good concept for you to elaborate on. And I can see why you've gone down that path of elaborating on the concept. And if you could explain a little bit more what the deeper qualities that you're referring to as above the line and below the line, or the amped life. Yeah. Is the above the line. Yeah. Which you were, you're always amped about the things you were doing in life, which is great, and so was I. But the below the line is that stillness, that sense of being. and then how do we integrate the two, I guess and so you've gone to the next step. I mean, you haven't just written a book about your life's experiences, and we all know what it's like to have that urge to tick the boxes. But you've gone the next step and given a roadmap, I guess, for how to integrate the two so that we can embody it and live it in our lives and not have to take ourselves out of being active.
Yeah. Well, I think you've summarised it quite well. And basically, the challenge in writing this book is that you can write it from a lot of different levels. So ticking the boxes, as you say, it reaches a point, and hopefully when you've ticked enough boxes, and I guess we're very, very fortunate to actually have had the opportunity to tick enough boxes to say that ain't it, right? You know, that's not. I've ticked enough boxes. I know that only can get me so far in terms of my own fulfillment, my own
Happiness.
sense of self-happiness, whatever you want to call that. And that's why I made the triangle. You know, it finishes, right?
Yeah, it's finite on the upper.
Yeah. And you know, I was watching. Me and my wife been watching, and Tonya have been watching this. This silly sitcom series called Friends and Neighbours on Apple TV, and it's basically about a guy who loses his job in a private equity firm, and he can't find another job, so he turns to crime and he eventually gets caught and all those types of things. But in all of that, he messes up a lot of other people's lives as well. And in this moment where him and two of his friends, one of whom was sleeping with his wife, the other one of which was his banker who he'd been lying to and fell out with, they all decide to go out and get terribly drunk one night, and they're lying out on the golf course after that, and one of the friends is saying, all I do is I work out what I'm going to buy, and then I buy it, and then we think about more things to buy, and then we buy those and talk about those. How did our lives become so hollow, right? So these are these ultra wealthy individuals who have kind of come to this realization that ain't it. And this is a very, very common thing that we see. You know, how many? Look, I've got nothing against, you know, wealth and all that. In fact, I've spent a huge part of my life pursuing it. But it's like how because of that privilege, because of that, we actually know more than, say, someone who is down, you know, at a point where they're aspiring to have more things.
Yeah, I think you're one of those people who was challenged a little bit with the process of, the acquiring stage, and the pull, the urge to look deeper and to dig deeper.
Yeah,
and I observed that a few times in your life, and it was a beautiful thing to observe. And I noticed in the book that actually came out in the survey that you took with your wife, who's a business coach.
Yeah, that's right.
She has a model that she works with her clients to sort of give them a tool to figure out where they are on that particular scale of that model. And you actually drew pretty low on the model, didn't you? I think.
Well, I think they're different numbers. There's no high or low, but I think it's more a propensity to I want meaning and purpose. Yeah, that's what. But I also want a fun. You know, I want a sort of a fun life or something like that. I can't remember
so
exactly.
You scored that.
Yeah, which in that sort of thing. But it is. You're right. It has been a struggle for me. I would probably say at some level it still is. You know, or it's sort of still unfolding. I mean, you know, recently, earlier this year, you know, we sold our house in, you know, quote unquote Cottesloe, right? Like it's a sort of a premium suburb, all that sort of thing. When I bought the house in Cottesloe, it was kind of like happened quite magically. I think I talk about it in the book and how it manifested. And then we subsequently sold it. And I went through this kind of grieving process because of my attachment to all that meant to me, you know, to own a house in Cottesloe, right? And that's just being really honest. I mean, and it's. I think I actually had a dream about it. I thought I was over it. I had a dream about it last night again, which was sort of still processing this
Wow.
stuff. But it just shows like how deeply ingrained it can be. But it's not about. I think one of the things that on my spiritual journey, I thought that when I had done all the work that could be done, I'd done all the courses and all the, yoga and all the meditation and all the stuff that could be done, that I would tie life up in a nice little bow.
Yes.
And I wouldn't have, there'd be no more challenges, right? And that was the goal, right? I was just looking to run away from suffering as fast as I could, until I realized that, it's all actually just accepting what is. Like the suffering the things that made me suffer are still there today. I just don't suffer as much, or I'll suffer intensely and then I'll let them go much more quickly. So to me, the journey is like, and I describe this in the book as well, like for me, detachment is actually as you grow your sense of self with a capital S, the smaller parts become less relevant. They don't go away. No. There's still challenges. We all know we have challenges.
Absolutely.
You're not, what's the word? You're not, surpassing the challenges. The challenges are there. It's just they don't affect you as much.
Yeah, you're less reactive.
Yeah, less reactive. And it's just literally you're identifying, as I said before, you're identifying more with the moment than you are with the circumstance. Yes. Right? And when you do that, that moment is like Teflon, like it actually, nothing can really stick to it. You come into the breath, you come into whatever your method is or way to get back to the moment. And it could just be, it just happens automatically, because this moment, there's nothing we have to do to deserve this moment, or there's nothing we have to do to earn this moment. This moment is always true, always pristine. Yeah. It's just we don't see it that way because of our stories, beliefs and ideas. So where are we going to identify, where are we going to, and this is like when spirituality is a concept, that's the hard part, because you're actually having to have faith without an actual experience of what you've got faith in. Yes. And I reckon I went through more than 30 years of that. Right. And I never take it for granted. It's not like I'm now done. No.
There's always more layers, aren't there? It's like,
and it's not even, it's just a remembering. Like some of my teachers have described it as like you've got some ink, right? And the moment or God or spirituality or faith is like water. So you keep adding water until it's like you're just becoming clearer and clearer, and you're diluting that, that stuckness or that those stories, and ultimately you just become.
We have a saying that Davey and I often remind ourselves of, and I'm sure you and I have spoken about it before, and that is to ask ourselves, who are we without the story?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
and to acknowledge that the story, and it's not that it's right or wrong, okay, but that we're not limited by the story. Yeah, and other people aren't limited by their story either, because we don't want to get into that habit of saying, defining someone by their story, okay, because we want to leave open that, okay, they are more than their story, just like I'm more than the story. Yeah. So that's like the drawing. One of your drawings you've got in your book, I think, surviving success, which I think is a really good term for it. Was you had like a frame, and the boxes are in the frame. So we can identify with the box as the story, but there's the frame that holds the stories, which we call awareness or the now. Yeah. And it's the timeless moment. So I guess a word that I've been applying to this is this word presence. Okay, because as we become really present, we're shifting into that now moment where the story, we can observe the story, but realize that it's passing by. It's sort of like it's coming in to presence, and it'll leave, but presence is still here. Yeah. So that's something we can experience for ourselves. We can experience what we could call pure presence. So the narrative arrives, whether it's the story or someone else's story, and then it dissolves back into presence.
Yep.
And when I talk about, and I guess what we're both saying the same thing there, is that becomes more tangible, becomes more real, and that becomes, like you talk about it being the bottom line, that becomes a constant, doesn't it? I mean, that's the unchanging aspect.
Yeah, that's right.
The stories are changing.
Yeah.
The boxes change.
That's right.
Different stages of our life. I want to.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything. Yeah.
What is it about us that it's unchanging? And that's the part of us that's beyond the story.
Absolutely.
It's outside the story.
Yeah.
And that's a part of us that I've been curious about for a long while. I know you are.
Yeah.
And I guess curiosity could be another way to, we talked about faith and belief and concept, but curiosity can't be underestimated for its potential to sort of motivate us and to find out what's there. It's the unknown. But we have part of the, all the steps and all the masters and all the teachings say that we have to be prepared to let go of some of the things we're gripping onto.
Yeah.
To be able to explore that aspect of ourselves. Because if the grip's so tight, it's like the monkey with its hand in the jar, trying to get the sweets.
Yeah.
And you know the story where the monkey can't get his hand out of the jar because he won't let go of the sweets. Right? So he's running around waving this jar everywhere. All he has to do is let go.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's like, we've got to be careful with language, because the actual, when we talk about, the self being part of self, the self is existence. It just is.
Yes.
It's not anything that
It's not the personality.
No, it's not. It actually is the undescribable. I mean, the Native Americans call it Wakantanka, the great mystery,
or the Wu Wei, or the Tao.
Yeah, the Tao, which can be described as not the Tao. So it's those types of sentiments, right? So it's like, this is where language becomes really, and this is something Shanti Mai used to say all the time, language is so inadequate when talking about, the divine or the, God or whatever. So, but, there are some great traditions that are pointing to the truth, right? Which is like, neti, which is not that, which is like what you described before, which is I'm not that belief, I'm not that story, I'm not that thing. So what remains, and what actually ultimately happens is you're all of it and none of it at the same time. And so where my practice is that I'm in a phase right now where my sadhana is like, I'm all of it. Like, so whatever I'm feeling, that is the divine, that is the expression of God, that is all of that.
You say yes.
Yeah, it's just all of it.
It's yes. Yeah, I'm experiencing this, yes. I'm experiencing this, yes.
That's right, yeah.
It's never ending, yes.
Yeah, that's right.
To the present moment.
Yeah. And paradoxically, not that. I'm not that, but I am that. Yeah. Because what am I if I'm not that? And there is no answer to that other than you're left with an experience of this moment. Whatever that is for you, and your nervous system will feed that back to people in different ways. Because again, it's just like it's like if everything is an expression of what is, those trees that we're looking at, everything that this chair with everything around us and that is here, and we are that as well. There's no separation, right? It really actually makes a lot of sense that there is no separation. Like it's not a woo-woo concept. It is actually. It's the only thing that actually makes sense to me.
Well, yeah, I mean that sense of being separate and being pushed around by experiences and by the world could be the root cause of a lot of suffering and pain. And shifting from that to a sense that I'm actually held in this fabric that is holding everything together. We're shifting. Then we're not so much a victim of the stories or of the experiences. Again, it has to be experienced though. You could read it 100 times and it may not have an impact. Yeah,
I mean, like I sometimes ask people, if you're not part of this existence, remove yourself from it. It's like, how do you remove yourself from this existence? Like you can take the body, right? A lot of people do that. They think that maybe that takes them out of this existence, and I would argue that it doesn't. But it takes the body. The function of the body disappears, but everything else remains.
Yes.
Right? And I love this word remains, because remains basically is what remains after everything else is stripped away, all the story, all the beliefs, all the ideas. What remains is, and there's a lot of great mantras that point to that. And the other great mantra, like gate gate para samgate bodhi swaha, is like carry on. This is the other thing, is like in spirituality, there is, we have ego just like everything else, and we think we've arrived somewhere. And gate is just, doesn't matter where you've arrived, you still carry on, just carry on. There is no end. It's like the bottom of the triangle. There's nothing to be attained other than a realization that we are everything, we are existence. That's it. It's very, very simple.
I mean, this image that reminds me of this image of the monk climbing up the mountain with a bag of rocks on his back. And the image was before enlightenment, he's climbing up the mountain. Yeah. And then the second image was after enlightenment, he's climbing down the mountain with a bag of rocks on his back.
That's right. Yeah. It's a beautiful journey. Like, it's one of those I think we've had this conversation before, is that this is a conversation that, even though you're talking around the same subject over and over, it's like when I go to satsang,
yes,
it's always pointing to the same thing over, and just same thing said hundreds of different ways in that moment.
It's a state of being.
But it never grows tired, never grows old. It never grows, for me anyway. I just never get tired of conversations about truth and consciousness. And I don't know what that is, other than it's kind of it's insightful in the way that, why does that conversation never get tired?
And I had this conversation with Davey. We did a podcast last week on the Yoga Sutras, and at one stage I said that I'd picked up the Yoga Sutras 20 years earlier, and it didn't make much sense to me. 20 years later, I can now deliver a lecture, I can deliver a course on it, and I think help bring people along in their understanding of what the Yoga Sutras are alluding to and where it was pointing. But I couldn't do that first time. But 20 years of being curious, being open, practicing and listening and being fascinated by the topics that we're talking about here today, sort of, I don't know whether it's sort of like you marinate in it, or you ripen a little bit your understanding together with your experiences. But I think there's another element that goes along with it as well, because it never gets, I agree with you, I never get tired of the different insights and aspects that can come up along these lines. So I think there is a physiological element to it as well. I'm learning more and more about that. It's not, we can't just will ourselves into understanding or experiencing what we're talking about sometimes. I think there is a physiological element, because we know that our breath, our nervous system, our anatomy is all entrained and linked to our conditioning, our programming, our life, and our life story.
Yeah.
And so there is a bit of, I always come back to saying, in my case anyway, that I did require a bit of work to shift the prana, to shift the blockages, to clear some of the physiology and anatomy that was linked to another way of operating, another mode of operating. I'm not judging that other way of operating. It may have been necessary at that time to get through some of the stages in my life. But now I'm feeling, no. At this stage in my life, I'm going to be more heart-centered. I'm more interested in how open, my throat center is, and whether I can connect to, how open I am in my higher centers. So moving from the lower energy centers, which is we regard as being sort of like survival orientated, base chakra, and if we move into our second chakra, it's more about belonging and that sense of being part of a group, which is a powerful. And when we're mammals, we live in groups, and we can't avoid that. But we have to navigate through that stage of our life so that we develop that authenticity, and we're not sort of going with the mob.
Yeah.
Right. And then our third energy center, our solar plexus or the hara, transforming this area as well. There's so much power and energy in the center that can motivate us and provide us the fire to get on in life and tick those boxes, right? But if it's overactive, if it's over projecting into the world, or bringing that into balance.
Yeah.
So this has been part of the story for me as well. And so I sort of now appreciate the ability to be more present now as a result, in my case anyway, of doing some work to understand my own prana and how that influences my nervous system and my ability to react or respond. And I think athletes do that as well. I think when we talk about those athletes that are, they talk about the flow state as an altered state of consciousness. And we had this conversation once before. In the years and years and years that they've put into that particular activity, they have transformed their anatomy.
Yep.
Their breath, their heart rate, their cortisol production, their adrenaline production is all changed to meet that specific requirement.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's I think it depends. Like for me, my goals, I guess, have changed a little bit on the path. Like, well, I took a guru, like, as I say, 30 plus years ago, and I didn't know really why. I knew about this idea of self-realization and enlightenment and all that sort of thing. But as I've gone more and more on my journey, that has become the main goal or the main intention. I don't know that you could really call it a goal, because it's actually, a goal is separate. And so what I'm realizing more and more is that there is no separation. And so it's like, and I'm an expression of that. So whatever I'm expressing is just to come to acceptance in that and see it. And actually, ultimately, there is no seer, because you're all of it. You are it. I mean, that's the ultimate God realization, right? So it's like there is no concept of the other. Literally, it's not just I'm not living that right now, but it's like, ultimately, I do know some beings that live that way. It's like they are genuinely, and they're the teachers I turn to, because I believe that, I absolutely agree with you that we have to do the work. Like, you have to do the yoga, you have to do the breathing, you have to do the, whatever it is, whatever your practice is, and there's lots of them. Those practices are super important, because we're cleaning up the energy system. We're creating a nervous system that's getting ready for more light, more consciousness, more expression of the truth, effectively.
Insights.
Yeah, but just like, I can't even explain it, other than it's like, if we're one,
yes,
but we're not experiencing that right now, what's standing in the way?
Yeah.
And that, all I'm saying is that we have a lot of ideas about what helps us clean up what's in the way. We'll go and do, 3-day breath workshops, or, go and do all this stuff, right? It's not, it serves a purpose in that it cleans up the nervous system. But to me, in my experience and in my knowing, it doesn't take us the last mile.
Yes.
We need like an enlightened master, or someone who can do that for us, to stabilize the energy, to actually, it sounds weird, right? Like, from a Western context, what I'm saying sounds very weird. From an Eastern perspective, it's
normal
for a lot of people, and even in the East now, it's kind of weird for a lot of people. But, historically, over centuries, this has been a practice. We all know the great teachers like Ramana Maharishi and, Nisargadatta and, Maharishi Mahesh and all these types of things. Yeah,
that goes with it.
It's a skill, and those masters have the ability to take their devotees and students to a place very over time when they're ready to just go click, and then you all of a sudden kind of the lights come on. But if you try and turn the lights on for someone who's been drinking beer and eating pizza for like 30 years every day and smoking, no judgment on any of that, because actually the more also I go on the journey, I go, it actually doesn't matter if they've been doing any of those things. If they're ready to wake up, that will happen as well. Yes. It's not necessarily the person that sat there for, on the yoga mat. They may never wake up, and the guy who's in the gutter, he may be. In fact, I believe that a lot of people who are homeless, and are lost, have actually woken up, and society doesn't make sense to them anymore. So you have a look at some of their eye, you have a look at some of these people on the street, they're awake. Like, they're more awake than, a lot of people like us who are living in a stable environment. But that's sort of another topic. My point is that I think the reverence for some of these, and there's very few of them around now, like these teachers who can take us that last mile, that's becoming a bit of a lost thing, and but it's also re-evolving at the same time. And as it re-evolves, there's also how do you discern? Like, you just kind of have to. I don't know the answer to that question. I feel like my own discernment has been. Have I been lucky? Has it been fatal? I don't know. I feel like my own discernment is pretty good, but we'll see.
Wow, thanks, Tim. That was covered a bit there, but just unpacking a bit back to, I think, where that little bit of conversation kicked off, talking about separateness and connectedness. And it reminded me of this definition of beauty that I like, which was the moment of the recognition of the absence of otherness. Right? Yeah. You should use that word that there is no other. Yeah. And that sort of brings in this, just brought that to my mind, because that moment of recognition of something's beautiful, or recognizing the beauty within ourselves. Yeah. So there's that moment where it's not other than me. No. The beauty is not out there. The love is not out there. Whatever it is, it's seeing that is in me. Right? There's a shift. Right? So we can, we can argue about what's beautiful, but everyone's going to have a different view of it. But you can't argue about the fact that is an inner experience. Yeah. And there's a melting down of that separateness, right? And so if we go through life, if everything was beautiful, the homeless person's beautiful. Yeah. It's you that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. That's the unity. And I think it's, it is. But you have to be in the moment to experience that, don't we? Yeah. I mean, we are, but the thing is, again, this is where language is in, like, we are in the moment. Yeah. How can you get out of this? You can never not be in it. No, you can't not be in it. So it's kind of like, but you can get attached to the stories exactly that take you out of it. That's right. So this is the baseline. Like, we are always here. We are always now. Can't be anywhere else. So if we accept that, and this was the other thing. Like, I know I'm talking a lot about Shanti Mai, but she was just such an incredible teacher. Right. And she would just not. If you went down the path of talking about, I'll call it bullshit, right? Which she would just call anything. That they're my words, right? She wouldn't say that. Well, she probably would, but it's like, I wish I met her now. Yeah. She would, if you veered off and started talking non-truth, right, going into your stories and all that, she would just shut it down. Yeah. And so it was just this constant, like, go back. This is who you are. Go back there. Go back. Yes.
Go back there.
Yes.
So there was never any opportunity to. Look, I get caught up in story all the time, but these days I tend to catch it. But for me to say I don't get caught up in story would be a lie. Like, I think we all get caught up in story. In fact, even
There's
in
power in stories.
even in
There's
Enlightened
power in
Masters,
myths.
but I'm saying getting caught up in stories, right? Like, even I've seen the Enlightened Masters, they even get, it's just the rapidness with which they let it go. It's like, it's done. Everyone else is holding on, to their story, and the Enlightened Master just goes, it's done.
Yes.
It came, it went.
Yes.
That's it. So, yeah.
So where to now, Tim? The book's out. Surviving Success.
Yeah.
It's an important term because, we could climb the ladder of success and find out the ladder's on the wrong wall. Leaning against the wrong wall.
Yeah.
So,
look.
You're going to be giving some workshops on this or some talks on it. I mean, is this the first podcast you've...
Yeah, this is the first podcast.
You've had to introduce your text.
Yeah. So the I don't know, quite frankly, Dave. I wrote the book because it was a box. Ironically, it was a box that I wanted to tick.
So do I, actually. I've got one in the computer there somewhere.
And you were hugely helpful in the evolution of this book when I wrote various manuscripts, and you did some editing for me and whatnot. So I want to thank you for that.
No, it was my pleasure.
And so I don't know. It's
another one maybe one day.
Yeah, maybe. Like I almost feel like that book was like getting it out there, and then there's probably a book that can be a bit more I don't know. I think almost like a second edition of that book, and I'd feel more comfortable. So but the book is available on Amazon. And you can find it there if anyone wants to buy it.
I'm sure there will be. It'll give people an insight into a lot of really valuable ideas and concepts, and more relevant to people, I think, starting out on the journey too.
And there's one chapter in there, Dave. I think I spoke to you about it when I saw you in the coffee car park the other day. But it's called Permission Givers, one of my favourite chapters in the book. And it was actually a day when I was really struggling to get pen to paper, and so I sat in a cafe, and I started observing in very small ways what I would refer to as permission givers.
Right.
And I observed what looked like a wife feeding her husband food because he looked like he had some form of, neuro style
degeneration,
disease, exactly what, type of disease, and couldn't control his,
motor coordination.
Exactly. And so she was feeding him, and I watched that, and it really touched me very deeply because it was not done with any, like resentment or, like it wasn't any of that. It was
compassion.
It was done with a lot of compassion, a lot of love.
Yes.
And then I observed someone else coming into the cafe who was on crutches, and someone went to open the door. So just these, I saw this other guy fully tatted up, and I sort of had immediately, I went, who's this guy? And there was a bit of judgment. And then I saw him, he greeted his mate, they hugged each other, and it was, obviously so I just saw these 3 or 4 different things, and I just started writing about it. And even as I say it, I don't know, it touches me quite deeply because I think that for me, what I find touches me the most is great acts of kindness,
Yes.
You guys are great at it. You've always, in this community, you're always doing great acts of kindness and community, putting things out in the community. It's very beautiful, but that's what really,
Greg Campbell in my interview with Greg and in his book, he talks about this term that he was given and given the job to actually go and share it and spread the word out, and it was living proper way.
Yeah.
And living proper way was to be naturally kind.
Yeah.
And to be naturally caring for people around us, the environment, for the water, for the air, for the land. That's proper way. And
I like that.
Yeah,
I really like that.
It is, and we can feel it when we see
Yeah,
it.
you feel it.
Being kind is proper way. Being unkind is like
you know it when you feel it, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that I don't know
and
what it is.
We feel it here. He called it the lian.
Yeah.
You know, having strong lian. If you have strong lian, you can live proper way.
Yeah.
You know, so.
Yeah, and I, like I think whenever I watch a movie or anything, when you see movies are great because you watch them and you go, is the person going to do this or are they going to do that?
Yes.
And when they do this and it's the proper way as you describe it,
right,
it's moving. Do you know what I mean? It inspires us, right? So I think we're living in a time right now where that's more important than ever.
Well, it is.
And it's just, I don't know. Again, we've got the opportunity, the privilege to be able to. And we've got the time, we've got the resources to do those types of things. So it's that to me, I don't know. That was sort of the point in the book where I go, I can really feel that. I can say these other things, and I can feel it, but I can really feel that part. So it's these things are instructional, right? Again, they point to what is your truth like.
Beautiful. No, your truth is definitely shining bright, and it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you today. Tim. We've been talking about it for a while.
Yep.
We finally got it going. Is this your first podcast?
This is the first.
The first one. So we'll end it there. I'm sure there'll be a few more.
Yeah.
There's lots of areas that we can follow up with after this
conversation.
It's been wonderful having you on, and so thanks, brother.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.